really is hard for these people to break the poverty cycle when they don't have education. We would like have these conversations like every few months. We should just quit this and get like a job where we can make some money. You know what I mean? Just because like there's that balance, right? Probably to build relationships. Because those are the things that last, and to not care so much about all the little things that get in our way. I didn't want to get stuck doing something that I felt like wasn't helping people.
All right, welcome to the Rad Dad Podcast. This is episode 22. I have my good friend Phillip Whiting on the podcast, which is a small miracle, and you'll learn why here in a little bit in this episode. But Phillip travels a lot, but I was able to lock him down for this evening, and happy to have him here. Just to start off the podcast, tell me a little bit about your upbringing, where you grew up, and some highlights of your childhood.
All right. Well, I'm from Mapleton. Grew up most of my life in Mapleton. And every few years, my parents would take us out of the country. So I lived in Panama when I was in 3rd grade, and then Chile when I was in 8th grade. I guess just those two.
So not vacation.
No, we lived there for about a year each time. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's kind of, I mean, I was in Mapleton my whole life, you know. I mean, Mighty Red Devil. Did you go to Springville?
No.
Spanish?
Yeah.
Shouldn't have come. I'm just kidding, man. So I grew up in Mapleton and liked to travel, because probably a lot of it because of my parents. You know, when we were young, we traveled a lot, and my dad liked moving around a little bit, but we always had a home base in Mapleton.
Okay. So was that normal to you, or did you know by 3rd, 4th grade, like this is pretty cool what we're doing? This is
I don't know that I thought it was cool. The first time was cooler because I was younger.
Yeah.
And we had this in Panama we did homeschool, and one of the things that we did was like count how many trees we had and different species of plants, and we had I don't know how big it was, but it was a pretty big backyard. Tons of trees, mango trees, coconut trees. I mean, I practiced pitching against a shed with mangoes, you know, it was pretty cool. So I mean, I liked that. It was warm weather, rained a lot. We did some fun stuff. We went to the beach and stuff all the time. But then when I was older, I didn't like that one as much. I thought I had friends, you know, in 8th grade that I was leaving.
Your parents were ripping you away from your friends.
Yeah, which turns out I didn't ever have friends anyway. So so it didn't really matter. But I just thought I didn't think it was normal, but I also didn't think it was as weird as it probably actually was, you know. And at that time, I mean, that was 20-something years ago, right? So people weren't doing it.
Yeah.
It's a way bigger thing now. And you got Google Maps take you wherever you want to go and stuff. And Airbnb. I mean, before it was like we would show up and stay in a hotel or somewhere. We stayed at like Temple Housing sometimes. Like I remember that in Chile, we stayed at like Temple Housing, and then my dad flew down because we ended up living in a place that was like 30-something hours away. So he flew down, took his little, you know, camcorder that's like this big, you know, and filmed a few different houses and brought it back to the place that we were staying and said, hey, where do we want to live? And picked one and rented it for a few months, and that's how we did it. So
at what age did you recognize like, okay, I have the travel bug?
Oh man, that was probably more like we did those trips, and then we did a few other trips before my mission. But it wasn't really till like after my mission so my wife and I got married in 2009, and then when she was pregnant, and it must have been 2011. No, it was the end of 2010. We had just bought a duplex. We had no money left, and before we bought the duplex, we had purchased flights to Italy. That's where I served my mission. And so it was like, we have to travel because when we have kids, we'll never travel again, right? Everybody told us that. Yeah. And so we did, it was like a 22-day trip, and we paid like $2,500 or something for all, and we did a 7-day cruise and everything. We're all about cheap travel, right? But so we did that and went to several different countries and just had a good time. And somehow, like, honestly, it turned into like, my family generally travels more than others. But then it was like, oh, I want to be like the one that travels the most in my family. Be the one who went to the most countries and stuff, you know? And then it just like turned into like, we're pretty good at finding deals, having fun. I hate being in Utah in like February, March. Like
here
right
we
now.
are.
I mean, March is not bad, but this year is like
It's
January.
bad.
Yeah. So, so that's it, I guess.
So what was different about your upbringing? Like what did you learn going on these trips and living in these countries at a young age that you may not have learned otherwise?
I guess I learned to like see people how they are, and not judge so much where they're from or what they look like or what language they speak and stuff.
Yeah.
I also from a young age learned to appreciate culture a lot. Like not the culture, like, I mean, you know me, it's not like I go to the plays and theater or the theater. None of that. I mean, culture, like, appreciate typical dances or like the language and the fact that the food. Yeah, for sure. That's why I went to Cuba, because you said how good the food was and like all the local people. So, anyway, that's something that I think helped a lot. And like from like my whole career choice, like in nonprofit and stuff, stemmed from like these experiences out of the country. Right.
Okay.
So like, with Utah Bands, the nonprofit, it's like the main guy, the reason why we started it was actually a missionary when we lived in Panama, who lived with us.
Serving in Panama.
Yeah. So he was from Guatemala, serving in Panama. We moved to Panama. Mission president put him with us, and like he and his companion, the zone leaders, lived with us. My dad was the branch president, and we just, got to know him pretty well. And so side effect, 10 years later, it's kind of a story. You want the story?
Yeah, I do. Okay. I was going to get into this because it's very interesting, and it's kind of shaped who you are and why you can travel. So give me the rundown of what Utah Bands is.
So Utah Bands is a nonprofit that sells bracelets that are handmade in Guatemala to try and raise money to pay for kids to go to school. In Guatemala is where it started, and then it's expanded into Zimbabwe. Okay. And so so we lived there. It was like 1996 when we lived in Panama, right? And so then fast forward 10 years, I graduated high school, and my parents said, hey, you can go, like they gave me a trip anywhere I wanted to go in the world, because I got my associate's degree when I graduated high school. Okay. And so I decided to go to Panama. One, to get my money's worth out of it. I'm a cheapskate, so if someone's going to pay for a trip, I chose a 14-day cruise through the Panama Canal, started in Puerto Rico. It's a super cool cruise. And but anyway, one of the stops was in Guatemala. So my dad reached out to this guy, and I didn't know what was going on, right? I was just happy to be done with school, pretty much, and to be traveling. So he reaches out. The guy meets us at the port in Guatemala.
You know him.
I remembered him a little bit. Yeah.
Because you were young.
Yeah, I was 8.
Okay.
Right? So I was now 18. But he took us around, and he's a super nice guy. And I think his family was there too, or at least his wife. And, and so he had, basically gone home and started a school where he was in this little town where there's no public high school. There's no high school at all. So when he grew up, he had to go to high school somewhere else, like boarding school type thing. And then came back, and instead of going into architecture, which is what his degree was in, he started this private school, kind of as a business, trying to make money, but mostly he was trying to help people go to school. And so when we got there in 2006, it was October, November 2006, he was like losing the school because he was letting so many kids come for free, and wasn't able to pay his teachers. And teachers are nice and they love teaching, but they're not going to do it for free. They do it basically for free, but not for free, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, after that, my parents came home. I went on my mission like a couple months later, and but they basically talked to neighbors, friends, family, and got people to donate to sponsor kids, like to pay for their tuition and fees. And he was able to keep the school open. I think they got like 35 or 40 kids sponsored or something. And then the next year they got like 10 more than that, something. And then the way that this all kind of went down after that is my parents took a group of people who were like sponsoring, like say that you're like, Lincoln's older and he wants to, or you want him to pay for a kid to go to school, like teach him the value of education and stuff. So he gets a job, works, he pays $300 for the kid to go to school. And then you give Lincoln a trip to go meet the kid. Right. So there were like some people who did that, took their kids down, and
Was that the plan from the beginning? Like eventually we're going to go
No,
visit?
but it was, I mean, it's like, I'll set the record straight. Like my dad is a traveler. My mom lived in Mexico when she was a kid. My grandpa he's translated stuff for the church in Mexico. And, anyway, they were always into travel. And so here's another good excuse to travel, right? So that's kind of, I think what went down. I was on my mission for all this.
Okay.
But that's basically what happened. And they were down there one time and my mom saw some bracelets in the marketplace and said, hey, like, we hate asking people for money. I mean, it's the worst thing. If you try to do it, it's really hard. But if we could do this, we can buy 100 bracelets. We can sell them when we get home and pay for another kid to go to school without having to ask. Get our money back out of the bracelets, right, that we spent to buy them, and then pay for another kid to go to school. So my sister saw them. This must have been like, would have been like fall of 2008.
Okay.
And so she saw them on the counter and said, hey, I need a project for school. Let me sell them. And so she put a little video announcement thing together and sold all 100 the first day during lunch. And so they ordered more from this guy. His name is Daniel. And so he sent more up and they sold all those. I think they sold like 450, 500 bands. And so that's kind of how it started. So I came home from my mission shortly after that. And then we started selling them at, I didn't know what I was going to do, right? It was like up to mission. That's how far I'd planned my life.
Yeah.
And so, so I was in school and then we started selling bracelets we sold them at like Spanish Fork High, like middle schools around Payson High, stuff like that. And
did you have any type of business model at this point?
Oh, no,
were you still just slinging bracelets? And
yeah, basically, I mean, we were selling them for $7 at the time. They're 10 now. They were actually 7 for like 10 years, right? But yeah, we were like amazed that it was going so well because they're just little bracelets. I didn't even wear one, but like
I remember buying them in high school.
Do you? Yeah. So it was my mom's idea
in like 2009.
That was a long time ago. It would have been one of the originals. Spanish Fork.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kendra.
Yep.
Did the project.
Mm-hmm.
Those first ones were a big deal because I was like working with them.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, in 2000, before COVID, we were doing like 300 something schools a year.
Okay.
Before it was like when we're doing few, I could remember who they all were.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
So anyway, we had a plan and we had goals we were trying to hit to sell this many to pay for a kid to go to school. The struggle was that we were like giving almost all the money back, and so there's like exponentially you could make some money for the organization eventually, but we had some bases we had to cover and stuff. So it was a struggle the first several years. I think the first year I made like $1,200 or something the year. And it was like full time. Like I was like putting off school. I mean, I was in school, but I was not doing homework, which I guess wasn't weird, but to be able to do the UTA bands. And, but it just evolved from there. We went to a student council conference in St. George, and it kind of went around Utah after that. And we did a bunch of schools.
At Dixie.
And it was. Wow. You remember that?
Yeah.
Wow. Good job, man. So
at what point in this whole process did you say, okay, we're going to run with this and really try and make it work?
Probably 2012, something like that. Yeah. So it was a few years of just
so was it just kind of a hobby?
Well, no, it was like let's do this as long as it lasts. But like, these are trendy. Like this trend is going to end. Like people aren't going to be buying bracelets like forever, but like, man, we were wrong, and so it took off like 2012, 2013, that time. In 2013, we moved to Nicaragua, my wife and I, and we had a 2-year-old at the time. And that was right about the time where it was like, we could like take this seriously. And this job allows me to like not be in one place. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like when I went on my mission, it was like I went into the MTC like a week and a half before I turned 19. And I thought I was so cool because I was like, oh, I'm 18 years old. Now everybody goes in there 18. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, oh, I was working from home. And I was like, well, now everybody works from home, But like at the time it was like, man, I was like the weirdo. I was like the black sheep. In-laws or my grandma, like shunning me because I wasn't going to school and getting a normal job and stuff, but like, so that's when it took off. And my dad my parents were still involved, like at this point, like with the whole thing. And so we started taking turns. So he moved to Guatemala for a year while I did everything here. And then I moved to Nicaragua and he kind of took over like the shipping and all of that stuff here. But, for the most part, yeah, we could do everything from like virtually with Skype. Back in the day, we were using Skype,
Oh,
you
man.
know?
Yeah.
And so I remember teaching teachers what Skype is and what a video call is, which is hilarious now, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
anyway.
4-year-olds can do it now.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So that's the story. I mean, with Yuta Bands, and then it grew into, I mean, we expanded into 2 different locations. We had 150 kids sponsored every month in Guatemala, 150 in one location in Zimbabwe, and then 100 in another. So we were up to, 450 or so students
That you're putting them
that we're paying
through
for. Okay.
K through 12 or?
Yeah, no, so most of the world has, like, they call it primary education. We call it elementary school, right? So up to like 6th grade, typically, I'm not going to say everywhere, but even in many developing countries, they've got education up to that point. So everybody wants their people, their population, to be able to read and write and stuff like that, right? So they invest in that kind of thing. But then beyond 6th grade, so starting in 7th, so the last 6 years from 7th to 12th, you got to pay. And not everywhere. If you're like in a big city, a lot of times there's school. Like in the city that we started in Guatemala, there was one public middle school or junior high for like 7th and 8th grade. And there were no high schools. So if you wanted to go to high school, you had to leave. You had to go. And where this is it's like between 2 mountains. So you had to go like up a mountain every day to get up to both ways. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. You have to get up the mountain, and it was basically impossible, super hard. And this one public junior high serviced like 60,000 people, you know, so you're not getting in. Mm-hmm. So that's the main thing, is that the bracelets that we sell pay for the tuition or fees related to going to school in private schools. And then in Zimbabwe, they have public education, but you pay. This is basically like a private school. It costs the same to go to a public school as it does a private school. So we actually don't do the public school thing. We do the private school because they're more business minded. They'll let us do what we want. Our kids all do video calls now. Those were the Skype calls I was talking about. So if you do a project, you can video. I still want to say Skype, but you can Zoom or do a Google Hangouts with your student that you're helping. And so the private schools just work with us more. They understand that this is how we're getting the money. And so they let the kids out from class early and that kind of thing. So, So yeah, that's how it works with education. So it really is hard for these people to break the poverty cycle when they don't have education.
That's kind of the foundation of breaking it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, education, then learning how to actually take advantage of your education. You know? So I think that's when in 2012 we started a thing called the Leadership, Education, and Attitude Development, where all the kids that were going through the program or that were being paid, that their tuition was being paid for, they were then required to do certain things that we just kind of implemented in 2012. They had to quarterly, they have to come in and do a major service project, which we pay for, but they do all the work for, right? They do all the labor. And then they also do monthly interviews with a mentor and work on goals. I mean, most of them never even heard of what a goal is. Like we say, do you know the word for goal in Spanish?
Meta.
Una meta. They don't even know what that means, So we're like explaining what it is. Yeah. And so anyway, they do that. And then like, that's where we give them the money to. So this is probably more than you want to hear, but like,
oh, this is awesome.
They used to get bullied. So we'd send down money for these kids directly to the school thinking, well, we need to be responsible with this money. We're not going to go give it out to all the local people. They're going to go buy other stuff with it, but then there was bullying. Like everybody knew who the gringos were paying for. Right.
Interesting.
So then we started doing this, like the parents and the student have to come in. They get the money and they go over the grades and make sure they're getting good grades. And then that's the second requirement. The third is we do monthly workshops, which are basically like skill building ways to, like we kind of mentioned, the education is the first step and then taking advantage of it is the next. So we'll do like mock job interviews or talk about how to find scholarships for college, all sorts of stuff, like staying away from addictions and things. Like there are like if people would just like, I mean, there's some basic principles that you could follow that will just help in so much. Like all the men are drunk and they steal the money from their wives who are working hard. And then they have 3 other families. You know what I mean? So if you just like help avoid addictions, different things, and help them honestly keep principles, then they are going to do way better, So it's kind of an academic education mixed in with this leadership, education, attitude development lead.
Okay. So how does the travel opportunities for kids here in the U.S. tie into all this?
Oh yeah. Okay. So we would have, when we were first getting started and we didn't have much credibility, people would be like, how do we even know this is money's going where you say it's going?
Yeah.
It's like, well, we do video calls. I guess that's not good enough. Why don't you come down and see what we do? So it started as a way of like, kind of proving what we do, like dude, Jace, come check out what we're doing and see for yourself. You know what I mean? And so, and we almost got you on one, didn't we, to Africa video? And then we had a falling out and we didn't talk for 10 years, something like that.
I had a kid and
that's
COVID.
Right. Same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So now every year we do 2 to 3 trips. So we're like, you just saw I posted one today, right? So
Nicaragua.
To Nicaragua. We're trying to fill that group. We've got 8 or 9 right now, and I'm gonna get a few more people. So we just go down. We do some service stuff. It's basically like those workshops that we do. Mm-hmm. So when we go to Guatemala, for example, they're doing workshops every month. In June or July, depending on when we go that year, we do the workshop for them.
Okay.
Right. And then the big service project, we do that with them.
Okay.
So it's less of a I've kind of stopped calling them service trips because they are service trips, but it kind of has like, they kind of get a bad rap. Like, oh, you're not doing any good on these humanitarian trips.
Right.
These volunteerism things, Mm-hmm. Kind of some horror stories. You go build a house and then they rip the house down and then the next group builds the same thing, that kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
So we try and just like add on to this sustainability of what we are already doing with education.
Okay.
So that's what we do. And then we also do some visits in homes, and in Zimbabwe this year, we're building chicken coops and we're giving them chickens and training on how to start a little business. It's crazy in Zimbabwe you can go get an education, but there's 90% unemployment or some high number like that. So you're not going to go get a job. So it's more like an entrepreneurial track that we try and set them on, starting up their own something. We have one student that graduated that he raises rabbits. That's his business, and he's killing it with that, So it's kind of fun.
So who goes on these trips?
Anybody is invited.
Okay.
If they're over 16.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I do a
if
couple
they're under
years
16,
ago, they can go with a parent.
Okay.
Yeah, they can go with a parent. Yeah. So a few years ago during COVID, so this was like 2021, I guess. COVID was just like, you can kind of travel again, but they make it super hard.
Mm-hmm.
Took a group of 33 kids to Guatemala, and it was it was like youth conference. it was crazy. It was like me. I had my brother came with some college age kids, and then there was one dad, and then so there were like 20 kids between it was a little bit like babysitting, but the kids that come are great, like they're paying their way. Mm-hmm. So if you want to go, I'm not paying for you to go do the service. You're gonna pay. You go on your own, and we have an amazing time and good experience. Yeah. But so if you're doing that, you're listening to rules. You've worked hard to get there and stuff.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
But that's how that works. So it's more of a way of. For me, it's an excuse to travel and take people to places where I've been and that I love and kind of know the area really well. And then it's just every year there are people that do the project that want to meet their kid. And so we just keep doing those.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does it feel to you to have purpose, to have a job that gives purpose and adds value to the world?
Good. It feels good.
Yeah.
It's funny because if my wife is watching this, there were for the first 10 years, I'd say, which was only till a few years ago, we would have these conversations every few months. We should just quit this and get a job where we can make some money. You know what I mean? Just because there's that balance, right? But I didn't want to get stuck doing something that I felt wasn't helping people.
Yeah.
On my mission, I set a goal. I was like, I'm either going to do something with my job that helps people, or I'm going to be so filthy rich, I'm going to donate so that other people can help people. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't figure out a way to get filthy rich. So I'm doing the other one,
until the next step.
Yeah. If we can do the next step, then maybe I'll hand Udavans off to somebody else. But it feels really good. It's a pain, just like any other job can be a pain sometimes. I'm doing shipping labels. I'm talking to people to get their money back and their bands back and get the money at the right place. And the money transfer is taking forever. So then we're stranded and kids aren't getting paid and the principals are getting mad. And, so it's like, I'm learning how to do all that stuff better and more efficient. And now it's pretty good. But yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's the thing that I definitely like the most about it. It started out as a way to make money. Mm-hmm. And I probably shouldn't say that like publicly to everybody, but that was like my motivation as like a 21-year-old, I was like, I want to make some money.
Yeah.
I would like to help people too, but like, it was like, I'm going to sell more bands because I want to make money. And then like over the years, and as I saw, I guess the effect, like saw some really cool story, like testimonial stories, like there was one girl named Flor who was in Guatemala, and so they had the public school up to 6th grade, right? And then her mom was able to pay for her to go to 7th, 8th, and 9th grade and 10th, I believe. So she was like a junior. And during her junior year, her mom lost her job. Single mom, 7 kids, Flor's the oldest. So no job. It's like the first thing that goes is education. Not because they don't think it's valuable, but like school or food for my 7 kids, like, what are you going to choose? No matter how much you want to break the poverty cycle, I don't want my kids to die tonight. Right.
Yeah.
So that's why, like, while I believe education is the most effective way to break the poverty cycle, like these organizations that provide like clean water and food banks and stuff like that, like they're essential, like to be able to like get to the next step. Right. So anyway, she lost her job. Flor stops coming to school and that like at almost the end of the year. And that's that. Like, if you don't pay your fees, I mean, what happens if you just stop paying your Disney Plus? Like, it just stops, right? So that's what happened is she couldn't go to school anymore. And so she just didn't finish her junior year. And then her senior year rolls around and she was going to Daniel's private school, right? So senior year rolls around and we're just getting started. This is like our first year. She was one of the first kids that we sponsored. And he tells us about this girl and we're like, that's perfect. That's who we want to help. Like people who the teachers loved her. She had good grades. She did all of her homework. She was there every day, So go find her and tell her to come because she didn't come up for senior year registration. She didn't even show up. So anyway, he goes out to the house and he knocks on the door and, you can like hear people inside.
Yeah.
You've been a missionary. You know what I'm talking about. Like they're in there. They just don't want to talk to you. Right. So he just left and he ended up finding her. I don't know. It was like a few weeks later or something. She had gotten a job in the market where she was selling every day. Early hours, she had to walk 45 minutes in from her house anyway. She was doing that for school too, but to work in the market where she was making like $50 a month, right? Working every day. And so, that puts in perspective. When I tell this story to like the youth, like the kids that are like going to do the Udabands project, I'm like, how much is your cell phone bill? It's probably more than that,
Yeah.
So, $50 a day. He convinces her, he has to meet with, a month, barely over $1 a day. Right.
Yeah.
So he convinces her he has to actually convince the mom to let her come back to school because she's now making money and contributing to the family. So it's not just a matter of, there's opportunity cost, right? She could be working to support the family. So anyway, they work it all out. She comes back to school and she makes up the last month that she missed of the previous year, catches up her senior year, graduates as a secretary. There they pick at about 7th grade, they have to pick a career. So they study like to be a mechanic, or in her case, it was a secretary. She graduates, a new bank moves into town, Banco Azteca, and she applies for a job as the president secretary. Nails the interview, lands the job as president secretary of the bank right out of high school. And she's making $550 a month. That was less than a year later, but that's like the power of education. Wow. And so so it's like I get burned out on things and I'm like, oh, that's why I'm doing it, and that's why people buy the bracelets. They buy them. They might start out because of money. Like I started out for money and then it was to help people, but it's like, they start out maybe because the bracelet's cool, but then hopefully they realize that they made a difference and then they can like pass it forward, do something good for somebody else. Yeah. Or they come on the trips with us, and then they can see it firsthand and then they can build these relationships with the kids.
Right.
And I've got a lot of people that, have been to every country that I go to on these Udabands trips. They've been to all of them and they just love it because it's a cool thing to be a part of.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's get into traveling. I guess you could call yourself an expert maybe on budget traveling.
I don't know, man. But I like traveling. Yeah. I count my countries. I'm one of the people that count countries.
I know you do.
So I'm up to 53 countries, and I love traveling, and I love traveling with my kids. That it's funny because I mentioned how, everybody would say you're never going to travel with kids, which it is a lot harder. But man, like I think about the experiences that my kids have. Okay, a story I want to say, talking about kind of like the education that the kids get, but I mean, hopefully my kids' teachers aren't watching this, right? So my daughter had this class, right? She's in 4th grade, I think. And we take off. This was pre-COVID. This was 2019 in like November. We took off like a month and we went to Nicaragua. And my older kids had never been there. I've got 5 kids. My oldest was 2 when we lived there, so she doesn't remember much.
Yeah.
But we took all the other kids. No, we only had 4 at the time. So we took those 4 back, and I mean, we're jumping into the lagoons, we're hiking volcanoes, we're doing all sorts of cool stuff, right? And we come back, and the teachers, I can tell, like we go to the parent teacher conference, and she's a little irked that we miss so much school.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, whatever, I have a hard time because she's super young, like 20, whatever. And so anyway, I'm like, it's hard to be a teacher. I'm going to be cool. Like, fine, we'll read more. Don't worry about it. And then in February, we take off for like 6 weeks. We go to Africa. We go to Zimbabwe, Botswana, Ethiopia, and Zimbabwe. And then on the way back, we go to Italy. And so like we got out right before like COVID happened, like 3 days before they shut it down. When it actually started to matter to us. Nobody cared when it was in China, but when Italy shuts down, that's like everybody's top bucket list. Yeah. We don't want the Italians to die. And so we got to shut the world down. Right. Which, whatever. So I remember talking to like her teacher afterwards, and it was like, well, she's fallen behind on this. She was at this reading level. Now she's at this, and all these things that she missed. And I was like, in my head, I was like, do you even know where Ethiopia is? Ask her. She's been on safari. I mean, she's been like 5 feet from a real lion, like ask her about the Colosseum. She'll tell you how to get into it. Do you even know that? So like, I'm like, for the record, I got my associates because I sound super smart, but then I dropped out of college. Right. So it's like, I'm not an anti-education guy. Obviously I've spent my whole career trying to pay for kids to go to school. Like, I think it's important, but formal education, I've always had a little bit of a problem with. Yeah. Because I didn't test well. Like I got straight A's, but I had to work my tail off for it, So, I'm very much in the like world education more than, if you can read, do basic math, know how to find the answer online, unless you're going to be an accountant or a doctor, like I for sure want you to go. If you're going to operate on me, I want you to have all the education in the world. Right. I also want the practice. I want the experience, but like, you know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's one thing that like, I think has honestly become like invaluable to my kids, and they don't know it yet. And I don't know to the full extent of how much it's helping them, but I know that because my parents took me, like I wasn't afraid to, like there have been cool opportunities that came up. Like we bought some houses in Mexico. I was talking to a friend the other day, and he's like, how did you even dare do that? Like, I don't even want to like cross the border to Mexico. And it didn't even cross my mind that I wouldn't be able to figure it out. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, when we moved to Nicaragua, we didn't speak Spanish, like at all. Like I spoke Italian. We sold our couch, we sold our TV and my wife's antique desk that she's still upset that I sold. And we bought one-way tickets to Costa Rica because it was cheaper than Nicaragua. And then we took a bus up, and we didn't speak any, and we had like too much luggage. This was like one of our first travel experiences, right?
In
with
like
kids.
13 or
2013. And
you were there for a while, weren't you?
Yeah. 8 or 9 months. Yeah. And the plan was a year, but then my wife got pregnant, and man, it's so hot there. Yeah. It's crazy hot. So, so we came back for a little AC, but like, I forgot why I was even talking about that, but,
what scares you about traveling with kids?
Oh,
like
right.
What has been like some of the hard parts?
Well, I don't watch the news, which makes me a lot braver, I think. Probably dumber too, to go do these crazy things.
Maybe for the better though.
Yeah, I'm happier, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, I worry about I don't worry much about it. And I think that's why I can do it, why I like doing it. Cause like if you sit and like you panic about what the lady's gonna say when your baby screams on the airplane, or if you think you're gonna get kidnapped at the gas station in Switzerland or whatever. Like,
yeah,
man, like I know where to go on the west side of Springville to get shot, like it's around here too. And so I just figure that I'm going to try and live my life and do what I want, have fun, try and help people along the way, and not worry about the things that could happen. 'Cause so far they haven't.
Yeah.
But so anyway, but I did worry a lot about that at first, I guess. The kids, how are they going to behave and stuff. We have a sweet trick though. I think I might have told you about this, but when we travel, like our kids are not allowed to have any devices except when we travel. So like when we get on the airplane, like, I mean, they love airplanes. Like their favorite thing is the airplane. And I don't know if it's because they love airplanes so much or if it's because they love their Amazon Fires that they get for like 16 hours straight. Yeah. You know what I mean? Either way, they're the most well-behaved. Every single flight we go on, we get a compliment. Wow, your kids are so good. And I'm like, yeah, your kids are terrible, man. I couldn't sleep at all. I'd never say that.
What are the ages of your kids?
My oldest is 11. And then I've got an 8-year-old, 6, 3, and 1. Yeah.
And have you taken them all on trips?
Yeah, we've all been on trips.
Clan?
Yeah, we just did a trip to Hawaii. We like on planes, you mean, right? So it's like we've taken them all to Hawaii. My wife's taken my youngest 2 on a couple like girls trips kind of thing. And then all the way up, my oldest has been to like 35 countries, so obviously the younger kids have missed out on some of those. But my second to youngest, the 3-year-old, she'd been to 10 countries by the time she was 10 months old. And so she's traveled around a bit. And that was kind of the time, the pre-COVID, we did a ton of travel like in 2019. And I don't know why, but man, we were really happy that we did because we would have missed our chance. Not really, but it would have delayed it a couple years and stuff. So it seems like we like to always be moving and doing something else. Like for sure, I've been like, I mean, I don't struggle with depression or anxiety or anything, but like I genuinely feel sad if I don't have another trip lined up by the time I end my last trip. You know what I mean? So,
so people listening to this, I think they may get the impression that you guys are pretty well off if you're traveling so much.
I try to fake it till I make it,
Well, tell me what you've done to find these deals and
oh man, like there are some really easy things. So like, the biggest thing is flights, right? And if you want to go to a specific place during a specific time, like you're not going to find it. You might find like better than normal, but you're not going to find a good deal. So like because of my schedule and we're flexible, I mean, besides Utabans, we bought early on some properties. So like I manage properties, long-term rentals, and then we have these 4 Mexico houses that are short-term rentals. Those are a little bit more time consuming, I guess you could say, but I do it all on my phone, So I have the flexibility. I don't have a boss to like ask for time off. So when I find a good deal, I buy it. And then I go ask my wife. But I've gotten in trouble for that. So now I ask my wife first. I subscribe
to
flexibility. Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I let like the good deals kind of dictate where I go next. And then I like learn everything about that place. And like we got flights the other day. Oh, also we flip credit cards. I'll go into that in a second, but found a place a deal the other day, and there are several. There's like Scott's Cheap Flights, which I've never used, but I've heard is really good. Palmetto Travel. That guy, I think his name's Chris Mulestein. He's from Springville. I think I know his older brother and stuff, but like he does a really good job. There's one called Flights from Home, Salt Lake City. That's the only thing I subscribe to now. Best $40 you'll pay. Like absolutely.
It's 40 a year, isn't it?
It's 40 a year. Yeah. So we just bought flights. Still a little surprised for the kids, so I'll make sure they're not watching this part. But $190 or something from Honolulu to Sydney. And then we have so many miles and companion passes. So we'll get to Hawaii. And then for, $200 a person, we get all the way to Sydney. So, So like and we were not planning on that. Australia has been on the list of places that my wife wants to go. So we did New Year's over in Mexico. Gosh, and I'm not even answering your question. Sorry. I'll answer your question after I tell you the trips so far this year. Right. So like, Mexico over New Year's just at our place that we can drive to. And then we did Hawaii. And then we did Ecuador, just me and my wife, and Galapagos Islands and stuff. That was amazing. Swimming with hammerhead sharks. And then Mexico last week, and then we're just doing a few small trips. But this was like this was the year that like, oh, and then in the fall we have some to Europe. My wife was like, we're not traveling anymore, and I really want to do this cruise to
plus your Utabans
Alaska
trips,
plus my Utabans trips, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and Nicaragua this year. Yeah. So I really want to do this cruise to Alaska. Found a pretty good deal on it, and have miles Southwest to like fly up to Seattle, I think it is. And my wife's like, we've traveled so much, and we already went to Ecuador. This will be another trip without the kids. And then we have Switzerland for 2 weeks in the fall. And so the funny thing is, the way that I kind of convinced her to let us do this is by saying, well, let's spend more time with the kids traveling to Australia. So we took the kids to Australia, and then she was okay with like leaving them more. But for the record, we have not done many trips. It's been several years since we did like a trip with just us, and we like that. But so to get to my point, you have to like be flexible, I think.
Yeah.
And there are 3 things that I've found that really limit people in traveling, just from talking to people. And I bet that one of these falls for you too, right? Like you have your work time off, can't get any more time off or whatever. You have money and your kids, right? So those are the 3 things. If you can if you can work all 3 of those out, then you can go. And so one of those reasons is usually why people can't go, you know. And man, anymore, like if you have got a bunch of kids, like to have someone come stay with your kids, it's almost cheaper to take them with you if you're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but and I totally feel like I'm rambling on here, but from the very beginning, like we had these goals of what we wanted to do with travel and being free. Like that was the main thing. Like every decision we made for like career or where we move to, where we live is based on freedom. Like, can we be free to do whatever we want? We might not want to do anything. We might want to stay in Mapleton, but I want the chance. Like I want to do it if I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, so just by living like that for the last 14 years has made it so that we're now in a spot where we can leave, we can go do stuff, and we just take our kids. But there's a new twist to the kids thing. It's school. So school is hard now that my daughter's in middle school and stuff. That it's like, it's a whole nother, I haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, because a lot of families that do this traveling and stuff, they just homeschool.
Yeah. They homeschool. Yeah. But, and I would love to homeschool, but we did that when we lived in Africa, and man, teachers do not get paid enough. In fact, I'm going to kill it, but have you heard that Jim Gaffigan thing? It's like COVID taught me 2 things: that teachers are way underappreciated. Second thing, they all made terrible career choices. Like it's a hard thing to do. And if you're like super concerned, we probably did it the wrong way. Like we were doing like the online. So like we had a kind of like curriculums and stuff, like things that we were trying to get them to, like certain reading levels, math levels and stuff. If you were not so worried about that, and you were more like, hey, today we're in Rome, so we're going to learn all about the Romans for the next 3 weeks. And then we're going to fly up to Norway and learn about the Vikings. And then we're going to whatever, try this new food. And that was like what was important to you, which is what's important to me. But I'm just a little bit scared to like take that risk and do world school, because I don't want my kids to be like, this is so dumb. I don't want to be behind, but I don't care if they go to college or not. So I'm not sure why I'm jumping through all the hoops. Yeah. The main reason is my daughter loves middle school. She just loves it. So, it would be taking her away from a lot. And not that that's always a bad thing. Like if we feel like we want to do it and we're supposed to do it, we'll do it. And it sounds like we're pretty spontaneous in stuff that we do, but like everything we've done, like we've prayed about and we felt really good, like we were supposed to do. And we've been able to do some really good things. Like even in Africa, we did 3 wells, like irrigation wells. They helped thousands of people get daily water and stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I've thought about it and I'd like to do it, but I know once we get started, I'm going to like leave it all to my wife, and then she won't be happy that I made her do homeschool.
It's pretty demanding on the parents.
Yeah, absolutely.
But one of the things I've learned from being a father these past 3 years is that I love showing Lincoln new things about the world, whether it be my interests with sports or new foods or whatever. Yeah, I'm sure that is so rewarding and satisfying when you travel, even
Oh
more
yeah.
so, right?
Oh yeah, for sure it is.
Because
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to take Lincoln to Puerto Rico last year in
Right.
October, and
Right.
oh my gosh, he was like
It's
a
like a whole new world.
celebrity
Yeah.
with blonde hair and blue eyes,
I
you know?
bet. Yeah.
Like as soon as we landed in the airport, everyone was just like all over and
I bet.
like giving him high
Because
fives and stuff.
they see blonde hair, blue eyes. They see you, but they
Yeah.
don't see the little kids. Like
Yeah.
that's the unique thing about it.
Yeah. So, but just teaching him Spanish and like being at the ocean and trying new foods and stuff, even though he was 2,
Yeah.
he may not remember it, but I will.
Yeah, that's true. I've heard that a lot. Like, oh, well, why are you wasting your money? Like, they're not even going to remember this. It's like,
Yeah.
well, my kids are pretty good at like making up memories based on pictures.
Yeah.
And they know that they love it. And that's the thing that I want. Like, I also want that with their schooling. Like, I want them to love learning. And if they go the same path that I did, which is just, which we all did pretty much, is just go to school and study for the test and then forget everything and hate it all along the way until your sport is up. When your sport's in season, school is fun again, or the dances or whatever.
Yeah.
But so they've learned to love travel and they're not afraid to travel. In fact, we went to Mexico a couple months ago. I think this was like in November or something. And my daughter was like, hey, I don't want to leave because I've got like, it's hard to make stuff up. And we're like, okay, so what do you want to do? She's like, I'll just stay here. So we left her at home for a week. She's 11 years old. Side note, my parents live next door. So she would go eat dinner there sometimes. And I had a couple siblings come check on her, but she was not scared at all. And I said that to one of my friends and he was like, you just left her? It's like, yeah, it's Utah. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
No, but really what I said was like, yeah, I didn't even realize that would be hard for her, which it wasn't. I mean, she was in Malawi, like one of the least developed countries in the world. We lived there. She'd walk to church by herself with her little brothers, and I mean, it's close. We know what's going on. And our guard was following. I mean, we had a guard. It sounds fancier than it is, but like he would follow and make sure everything's okay. But like, I want to like raise these independent kids because the last thing I want is for them to come back and live with me because I'm not going to be like raising my grandkids. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm doing it. I'm trying to do it right this time so that they can do it on their own.
Yeah.
later.
I think that confidence thing it's huge. And there's a few great ways to teach it to our kids. Sports being one. That's where I learned my confidence.
Right.
But I've never thought about travel that way, but I think it does teach confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. It would for sure.
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about it either, but I think it is.
There's your little nugget for the podcast.
Yeah. Well, let me make a note here.
Yeah.
I did have one time my daughter was picked on because people thought she was lying about all the places that she'd been to. Someone in our ward. And that bugged me a little bit, but that's the only downside I've seen so far. And she got over it quick.
Yeah. She's like, let me show you my passport.
Yeah. Like, I have 3 passports.
Yeah.
Let me show you.
Yeah. That's cool. So what lessons have you learned in the last 11 years of fatherhood that you may not have learned otherwise? Without
travel? It's a deep question. Should have sent me a list of questions. I'm just kidding. This is why it's good, man. Mm-hmm. So I think that I really struggle with caring what other people think, even people that I don't know. Not like what you think of me, but like in the moment of my kids are screaming, I don't want to be that parent.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's hard not to think that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had that when I was a kid too. Like, oh my gosh, we got so many little kids in my family. They're all screaming at church. And so like, I've always been that way. And so travel has helped me like realize that I can't be that way. Like as long as we're being like, we're in the doing what's socially acceptable. If my kids are crying a little bit, like that's life. You know what I mean? So I've had to learn to kind of be more patient for sure.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, we were in Hawaii and I'd never been to Hawaii. Like I'm missing 3 states, Hawaii, Alaska, and Maine. And like, I'd never been to Hawaii. So we're like, let's go to Hawaii. And while we were there was, what was it? Oh, there was a day that the FAA shut down. I don't know if you remember this. It was like in January 12th or something. They shut everything down and it had this ripple effect. So like we were supposed to leave at 10. We ended up leaving like late that night and we had to stay a day in a hotel. We basically got to Honolulu like a day and a half late. Right. And we were only going to be there for a few days because then we were going to the Big Island. Anyway, so it's like, you have to be able to be flexible. And I've learned to like deal with those kinds of things. It's like, okay, well, now that we're in a little bit better financial spot, it's easier, because when it's like, man, I paid $100 for this thing, or paid like
it's a
$1,000
different
to go to the Polynesian Cultural Center. And now we're not even going to be there. Like, what are we going to do? But like most of the time, like stuff works out. Like I have learned that. And I mean, even then we went to the Big Island, and they had canceled our Airbnb and our rental car. They were out of cars. So it's like, you just got to deal with this stuff. It's harder with kids. It's like picture Amazing Race with 5 kids.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's terrible. Mm-hmm. But like, so the real you really comes out when you're traveling. And I'd like to say the real me is not yelling or anything, but I'm not there yet. But like, I think that that's a big thing that I had to learn. And I think it helps me in everything, you know, and it helps my kids. Like they can sit down and they can be respectful of anybody. Like if they think that they're supposed to be like quiet or reverent, they'll do it. Like when other kids are bouncing off the walls. And I don't know that that's like because of the places that we've been. I'm sure it's not because of my parenting. You know, I'm saying it must be something else, must be the travel, right? But like, or the fact that we travel so much that they have to learn to like see how the world works, and it's not all about them. I mean, my kids were there when we broke the water under the ground and it shoots up, you know, like those cool videos that you see. Like they've seen that.
Yeah.
They've been out to these super poverty stricken areas. They've talked to these, they're friends with their kids that have nothing, you know? So like my daughter, she has a Gab watch, but she gets to school and everybody has a phone, like legit, like 6th grade, iPhone 14, not uncommon. Right. And so she wants a phone, and all my friends have phones. And I look at her and I say, do your friends in Africa have phones? Because we will go back. You know, I will take you to Africa if you're going to say that all your friends have phones. You know, like we just do things differently, and it's the way that we want to do it. And she understands it because she's seen it and she appreciates it. And like she is the oldest, so it's easier to see, but she understands the most when we go places, and she appreciates it. And so that's really cool to see. And you'll see that more as like you keep doing stuff with Lincoln, you know, and so it pays off, takes a little bit of time. Like it feels like every time we come back from a trip, we're like, we got to go on a vacation, like just us without the kids or something, you know?
Yeah. It's a little bit of a job.
Yeah, it for sure is. It's not a vacation, it's a trip. Right.
Yeah.
But I love the trips. And, but besides that, other things that I've learned, as far as parenting goes, I think that, oh man, it's kind of a tough one, but what have you learned from travel as a parent? Give me an idea.
I haven't done it enough. I don't know.
You've done a bit.
Just a little bit. I think it's worth it. I struggled with the thing where he's not going to remember, and we're dropping all this money, but then you're sitting on the beach and a turtle swims up and he's like
freaking out.
One of the words he knows out of the 20 words is turtle, you know, and he gets to see it. So it's those little moments that are amazing. And then we go back and look at photos and he's like swiping through and looking at them.
And he remembers those things. Yeah. And I think he always will. I think it's cool because there's, you know, having lived in Africa specifically, like the whole racism thing, like my kids just see them as friends. They're best friends, you know? And so awesome. So I think that's something that is just a byproduct. I mean, I haven't taught them anything, you know, we just live, we just are there. And they see that like all my friends are Africans, and they can have friends that are Africans, or they can have friends that are Nicaraguan. Like everywhere we go, they have friends. Like they make friends very easily. And I think that, I don't know if that's from travel or just how they are, but like, I think making friends and being able to deal with people in different situations, and not like, oh man, look at this guy, he's smoking or whatever it might be, you know, like it doesn't have to be a race thing. He's got tattoos up and down his face. It's like, yeah, but remember, your good friend has that too. And so what's the problem? There's not one. And so they don't see that. So that actually teaches me a lot, you know, but I think that's a pretty invaluable thing, that like, if you want to help people see what people are like take them to where the people are from, you know, and really get a picture of it. You know, it's like the walk a mile in their shoes before you judge them kind of thing. Yeah. So they catch on. Even little kids catch on really easily.
Well, just to wrap up this episode, I ask all my podcast guests the same question. And that is, if there's one lesson you want to leave with your kids when you're no longer here, what is that lesson?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask that too. I remember watching some of these thinking, I gotta think of something good for that. Honestly, it would be probably to build relationships. Because those are the things that last, and to not care so much about all the little things that get in our way, that we make a big deal. We have all of our own problems, but I would say that it's take the time to do what's important and slow down a little bit, which is also a lesson that I need to teach myself. But I'd say that's probably about it.
I like it. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here and sharing your stories, insights, and thoughts.
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Cool.
man.